Hey everybody, I'm here with Merc. You go by Merc? Is that
Yep, I do.
okay? And Merc has contributed stories to this unbelievably beautiful
Oh, those look so
triptych
good.
mythologies. Mark, I just opened these like an hour ago. It's the first time I'm seeing them. I think I got the first copies, ordered them as soon as John Joseph got them up. They are stunning. I got to show you this. I didn't notice this until after I showed this on another video, but on the spine, look how the like one,
Oh,
two, three,
nice.
and like combine across the three books. Um, they're stunning, and your stories in these books are stunning. Your prose is so readable and so beautiful. I don't know if you've always been a genre writer, but you are one of those writers that it feels to me like you were writing literary fiction at some point and then started going into genre, or maybe that's you've read a lot of literary fiction or classics in the past.
I really haven't, I would say. I do like to read a wide variety of genres, so it's like I like to read all sorts of things. But yeah, I think my style sort of developed over the years.
It's
Um,
beautiful. It's so
Thank
readable,
you.
but also so florid and has, it's, as a, even before I got anything published and just wanted to be a writer, there was a habit of reading a book and finding a sentence or two that you love so much, you just read them over and over again,
Yeah,
just admire. Do you do that as well?
I do. Yeah, I just started reading. I'm gonna entirely blank on the title, but the guy who wrote Pontypool. I guess it's based on a novel, and there's a whole trilogy. And so I just started reading that the other day, and the prose level is just mind-blowingly good.
Do
So
you
I just
find
like
when you encounter writing that good, does it inspire you to sit down and write more, or does it make you want to just like walk away from it?
it definitely inspires me to write more. I just kind of like soak up all the words and be just like, oh, this is so good, and then it sort of like just it kind of like fills up the fuel tanks. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go work on my stuff now too.
I've had both, I think both responses to that. Sometimes good writing just like makes me want to sit down and pound out words. And other
Mm-hmm.
times I feel like, okay, it's already been done as well as it can be done. Um, so what's some of your writing, you've written a lot of short stories in the
Mm-hmm.
past and you've written some novels as well. Or you've working on a novel now. Is that right?
Working on enough. I have written novels in the past. I was actually as a smaller writer, I was wrote quite a bit for NaNoWriMo,
Oh yeah,
but
same here.
uh, but so far nothing has really reached the point of like this is finished and I'm going to try and submit it places. But hopefully with this current project, I'll get there.
Awesome. How many NaNoWriMos have you done?
I think I started in 2005 and I went through like 2011.
Whoa, that's
So
incredible.
yeah, didn't finish every year like the later years, but earlier on I was doing pretty good.
Yeah, I found it such a, I learned a lot from doing NaNoWriMo. It taught me
Hmm.
how to not miss a day, how to write every single day. And also learn, I used to think that you chose either quantity or quality. Like if you had a big, a lot of output, it was going to be garbage. And if you wrote just a handful of words a day, they were going to be perfect. But for myself, I found the days that I wrote a lot, it was usually my best stuff. Like I just got in the zone and it started flowing.
Yeah, I found that I'm definitely a burst writer, so I like to write like a lot in like a short period of time, and I have a little bit of a break, and then come back to it. But yeah, the days that I can actually get into the writing deep enough and long enough, I feel like that turns out some of the best prose that needs like the not quite as much editing as some stuff I just write in like 1 or 2 minutes at a time all over the place.
Does it ever surprise you when you start reading what you wrote? You're sitting down to revise or edit. You start reading and you're like, this doesn't need anything, and you just go
Yeah, that's
paragraphs.
always an amazing feeling.
Yeah, especially for me. And I had that experience. It's unnerving for me to edit writers such as yourself because I still feel like a newbie, and I have to like get the courage to say maybe this could be better, which is so hard for me. But I was reading, I think it was the third of your stories, and I started getting worried that I'd gone like 2 pages without a suggestion. And I was like, what's going on here? And I just realized sometimes you don't want to touch a thing. And you get up just leaving like compliments in the margin, like, love this, keep this. And you're like, I'm not editing at all. I'm just like a fanboy over here.
Yeah, the third one was, I actually had written a completely different first draft of that was nowhere near the same plot or anything. And then I didn't like it, so I started over and wrote the one that is now in the book. And I think that one, it some sort of like everything kind of just came together and just like poured out in like 2 days, and then was working on some edits. But yeah, it all came together, and I was very proud of that one.
That's a good feeling. I think some of my best short stories were written all at once like that. And some of my best stuff, I deleted things that didn't work and started from scratch. And I know that works better, but I still don't have the courage to do it as often as I should. It's so hard.
Yeah, that's why I really like having a computer, so I can just like copy paste things into a different document and don't actually delete it. It just gets to sit over there in the corner. And
I do the same thing. And it's like, I can't stomach getting rid of it, even though in that other document, I'm never actually going to use it again.
Oh yeah,
Look at it, but mentally I know it's not gone, and that does
that helps,
something.
yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the plot. I don't want to do any spoilers. People are going to
Sure.
want to read these for themselves. But one of the central themes, and there's several. You touch on quite a few things that are so, I think, even more germane today than when you actually wrote these stories. Like I don't know if you're following the J.K. Rowling uh, thing, and I don't want to put it all on her, because this is something that a lot of people on the wrong side of, like, saying people don't get to choose their gender, and things are very fixed. You also write a lot about gun control and in your story. I don't think this is a big spoiler, but it gets to the point where, like, white males, it's mandatory that they own guns. So it's like the most extreme version of the Second Amendment. Like, you don't have a choice. And one of the things I love about speculative fiction is taking something that's already broken in our society, and let's exaggerate to show how broken this concept is. But I want to talk about the gender identity. You identify as a them, they, and
non-binary.
Yep, non-binary. Help talk to me like a 5-year-old, and help me understand, like, what was what was it like growing up and starting to question things? When did you realize that he and she didn't make sense to you? Where does that place you in your relationships? Get as personal as you feel like it, but don't share anything you don't want to share. But I assume that everyone should have the right that I have to say what I am and who I want to be with. And so you should have the right, but I had to get in the mind of my gay friends to understand what they've gone through. And I have not yet done that with my trans friends, with queer friends, with non-binary friends. So help me expand my understanding, if you don't mind. And hopefully
not at all.
anybody who watches this can maybe help them as well.
Yeah, sure. So I definitely always kind of felt like that out of placeness growing up. A lot of it had to do with being raised in a sort of conservative Christian, very, very white Midwest culture. So it was always expected that, you behave a certain way, you dress a certain way. And like, I always just felt like something was off about that. And because it was so insular and isolated for a long time, it wasn't until I was I have a cat.
Please
Hello.
let the cat start the video. Man, like our views are going to go through the roof now.
Oh, I know. He's very helpful when I'm on the computer. But yeah, it wasn't until I was in like late teens before I was kind of getting online more, and then I found some science fiction stories like online, and a couple, I don't actually remember which ones now at this point, but there were stories that were kind of questioning about gender. And then I think it was in a story I actually read the they, them as pronouns for a singular person. And like, it was like that mind expansion gift that was just like, whoa, you can do that? And then I kind of started looking into it. I was reading about, neo pronouns and the different histories of like the they, them as a singular pronoun goes way back. And just like the more I was learning about this, the more it was starting to like click, like, you know what? I think this is me. So it was definitely a long process and hard because, starting out, I didn't really have the words to describe myself or kind of having the words to claim an identity. So it took a while of being really confused. And meanwhile, the whole time, everybody just assumes I'm a girl. And I'm like, no, that's not correct. But at the same time, for a long time, I was like, but I don't know what else to kind of like claim for myself. And then being online, it was a blessing because I could actually connect with other people, and slowly my social circle started to expand, and I found other people who were non-binary, and finding that term was like, it was so central to kind of everything clicking into place, like, oh, this explains so much, and this it actually feels real to me. So it was definitely a long process, and it was slow because I would be more like out online when it's a lot easier to be like, hey, hi, I'm this, and then people were like, okay, cool. Whereas in people space, it was definitely more complicated because a lot of the times I'm very non-confrontational as a person. So people just see me and they assume one thing. I'm just like, okay, I guess, So, but I'm proud that I've slowly been able to be more authentic in real life and kind of telling people directly, hey, I'm non-binary, my pronouns are they, them, please respect that. And in the last couple of years or so, I've been very pleased that so many people, like real life friends and people I don't know, just everyone's becoming a little bit more accepting of that. And the knowledge base, I think, has expanded to where people who might have never heard of non-binary before are starting to see it more and more, like, not necessarily mainstream, but you definitely see a lot more people embracing that and coming out and being like, hey, yeah, this describes me, this is what I am. And then seeing everybody kind of like, oh yeah, you're one of us, kind of thing, has been super, super, it's just really encouraging and also like supportive to see people just kind of acknowledge your reality and then also celebrate it with you. And that has been,
it sounds like something that takes a lot of courage to even, most of us don't live and examine life at all. We don't think about why human nature, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? Like, we just get through our day. And even people who get philosophical at times spend most of their day just going through the motions. So I think I've always admired anyone who takes the time to wonder, why humans behave the way they do, and
right.
what the cosmos is here for, and what happens after death. Like these, deep questions that don't have good answers. And I think asking those same questions about yourself is a special kind of courage. You mentioned that you're not confrontational, and it made me wonder, do you think it's easier? We all have these kinds of doubts. I remember going through puberty and like starting to like girls, but then you get so sexual, you're like, you get confused. You're looking at porn and there's guys in it, and you're like, well, that, it's all turning me on and I'm seeing naked guys. Like, what does this all mean?
Right.
And some people are more open about, what the struggle, and a lot of people wonder, like, you have some friend call you gay for something else and you're like, am I gay? Like, and I think even, I know I went through it. I think every straight person has also gone through a lot of this. And of course, anyone who is not binary has gone through it, and whether they broke free to the other side or remain trapped is their own journey. But you said you're not confrontational, and it makes me wonder if people who are more peace-minded, when they have this internal conflict, this war of different voices in our heads, I wonder if being non-confrontational means you're more open to hearing those doubts and saying, maybe there's something to that confusion, and you have more of a dialogue. Whereas confrontational people, I think when you're, and I can be like this too, where you get triggered by something and it makes you want to dig deeper, and like stand your ground.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's might be where some people get in trouble, who, if they had the freedom to choose the way you have, would end up on a spectrum. But because of that hyper sensitivity and that being triggered, if they don't hear their own doubts as a sort of an attack and fight back against that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of that definitely comes from like societal socialization. So like you're taught that there's a certain way to be, and for I know a lot of people, some friends who have been like questioning, but they face so much pressure to conform to a certain, basically a gender stereotype. Like if you're a guy, then you have to be masculine and not have feelings and all this kind of bullshit. And it's like they get so much pressure that it's just like sometimes you're just trying to hold the ceiling up to stop from being completely crushed, and it takes all your like energy to work on that, where you don't have as much brain space to be like, maybe I should think about if there's other options, or like maybe something doesn't quite feel right, I could explore that. So I definitely think it takes a lot of strength and courage to kind of question about yourself and about reality and different aspects of being human. And it's definitely not easy, and I've always had a lot of like long nights of insomnia, and I'm like, this like, did I like the doubts are still kind of there sometimes, even though a lot of it I think stems from, there's still a lot of like societal pressure, like you have to pick one thing and stay with that forever and never waver, whereas gender and sexuality is a very fluid spectrum. So you might, I know I've had people who think friends, they're like convinced that they're straight, and then eventually they're like, I might be bi, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome, and I'm very proud of them that they can that they've reached that point where they can be like, maybe there's something more to who I am that I get to explore now. And I find that at least for most of my friends that I know, when they find that that piece of themselves that's very true, and they're able to express it, they seem to be a lot happier, even though it does come with some risks, and definitely there's a lot of pressure to be like, oh, you're not really bi if you only date girls and you're a guy. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. But it is I definitely think it'll take a lot of strength and self-realization to kind of live your truth, and it's just a constant work in progress, because even though there's, I think, more acceptance, especially among like online circles, and younger people these days, I think, have really benefited a lot from having so much access to information online. So it's awesome to see so many young queers and non-binary people just coming out everywhere, and they're very much more confident, because I think they've had this like pool of information and personal stories, helped by having access to the internet, that allows them to figure it out.
And now you're doing the same thing, not just the internet. Now you've got, when people pick up an anthology and you get to influence people and be part of that process and help the next generation. I'm constantly surprised at the, you forget sometimes intolerance until you see it happen to people near you, close to you, or even yourself. I have always worn like Speedos for swimming, because I just don't understand swimming with like baggy shorts.
Right.
Like women figured it out. Like you wear tight stuff, and then you can like flow through
It
the
helps.
water.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was walking down the beach with a friend of mine in North Carolina, the state that I grew up in, and I have on a pair of Speedos, and two guys walk along the beach, and these guys tailgating on the beach started yelling like, "Hey, faggots!" Like, you know, and I was like, "Wait, my God, they're talking to me!" Like I've
Yep.
never had anything like that, and because I don't spend a lot of time in around people like that, but it's it's still shocking to me that there's that many people who, you know, you're talking about spending all of your time wrestling with yourself and trying to understand yourself.
Hmm.
Imagine spending your time wrestling with how other people think about themselves, you
I
know,
just
and
don't
like
know how they.
making that the focus of your political or social agenda.
Right. Sometimes I don't know how people have that much energy to focus so much on how other people should be.
I feel the
But
same way. It seems like a burden that I wish they didn't have to carry around with them because it's
hmm
so unnecessary. It's like, man, if you could just put that down, you're going to feel
oh right, yeah.
light as air. Um, and one of the things in your story, like I've always loved the idea of global resets. You know, in
Hmm.
Fight Club, the book and the movie, it was about resetting people's debt.
Yep.
And in your story, there's the idea that we can reset identity.
Hmm.
Um, is that what were you thinking when you put that into your plot? Like, is this an idea you've been toying with for a while that you wanted to write about, or?
It sort of evolved more sort of organically when I was, so I wrote the stories in order of number two, number one, and then number three. So
Okay.
I was working on the second story and trying to figure out what the main like some of the key threads, like the cousin networks that connect everybody, and very oppressive. And it started to like, okay, so if you had this, like we kind of do, you know, with different social medias and people, and you know, government records and medical records and all that kind of stuff that want to kind of confine you into certain spaces. And I know, like, for example, when I legally changed my name, it was like 3 months of just working to get an appointment with a judge, and then I had to spend another 6 months changing everything. It was just like a lot.
You
And
started to
so
feel
I've,
like I'm not in control of my
yep,
identity. Like somehow society and the government is telling me what I can
exactly.
call
I
myself. And
basically had, like, the judge who I spoke to, he was very nice, but at the same time, I'm like, why do I need a strange guy I've never met who is in a position of authority to allow me to decide my correct name? You know, it was like, so a lot of that kind of filtered into the ideas in the story of like, you know, if we could just reset everything, it would be it would be like, you know, obviously it'd be very messy for a while, but at the same time you would have blank slate and we could try again. And I think if that was possible on like a large scale, and people are given time to like think about who they are, what they want, and how we can work together as a society, it could like take big steps forward in kind of like making everything for the better. If we had, because we have so much baggage of like the, you know, the history of your medical records and all the very oppressive governmental regulations and everything that is, you know, kind of weighing us down and makes it really hard to change things. But if you could just wipe it all out and start over, I think you could do some really incredible steps forward for like humanity.
it's amazing how much baggage even well-meaning parents put so much baggage on their
Mm-hmm.
kids. I mean, when choosing a name for a child seems like too big of a burden, I think I would
Oh,
just call my kids like kid one and kid two
right. Until
until
they're
they're
old
old
enough.
enough. Like, well, what kind of names you like? Let's have a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
um, when I was a kid, you know, my parents, you know, were saying prayers and saying like goodnight prayers and all these things. And I'm learning language while I'm learning religion at the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm growing up in the South, and everyone talks about, you know, the North versus the South, and like, we're the good guys down here.
Right.
And I had to like unlearn so many things that were deeply instilled. And gender, of course, is one of them, like how you dress and what toys you're given. It's a really cool concept to think about. If you could do a reset, what would you change? What would you do differently?
Right,
And if there should be a more of a tradition of that about, I think there have been some cultures that when you choose a name. There were some Native American cultures where you get to a certain age and you earn your name, or you
right.
group. When I was just went to Burning Man for the first time last year, and there's a concept of your playa name, and it has to be given to you by someone else, but then you have to accept it. Like no one can force it
Right.
on you, but other people have to suggest it based on how they observe you and how you impact them.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I never heard about this before, but when you find out there's like more creative, interesting ways to do basic things like that, to me, it just makes me wish I lived in a richer world where, I mean, non-binary, that sounds appealing to me. Like there's nothing appealing about binaryism, like only having
Right.
two options. I want
All the
far
options.
more than that. I want things to be analog, not digital. And that's something I've always talked about spectrums for myself. Like I think I'm like way closer to if there's a spectrum with an origin in the middle and it's male and female on one side, I'm much closer to the female part of the origin than I am like way off on the extreme male side.
Right.
And there's no vocabulary for how to describe that, except that like no one can shame me for like I'm wearing women's pajamas now because I like the way they fit better than big baggy men's clothes. And when people make fun of that, it's like it doesn't do anything to me because I feel like I know where I am. One of the lines in your book, I don't normally read parts of the passage out loud, but I took a picture of this because I loved it so much. Let me see if I can find it. You write, and this is not spoiling the plot, this is from your third piece. You write, you know who you are and what you want. And just that, I know it's a very simple sentence, but it's not a simple thing to achieve. Knowing who you are and what you want seems to be what most of my friends, when we get in deep conversations, over the weekend, I was talking to a friend of mine who's had an incredibly successful life, and he's still trying to figure out who he is and what he wants. Do you feel like you're far along in that journey, and what to write that and write it where you did, which is near the climax of the entire triptych? It's the culmination of this character's journey. Is that the journey that you're on to figure that out, or do you feel like you're a good part of the way there?
I definitely feel like I'm still on the journey and probably will be for probably forever. But I definitely feel like I have a more solid grip of knowing who I am and what I want than I did 5-10 years ago. And I think it's a sort of a state of mind that just kind of gets expanded upon and like shored up, like the more I think about it a lot and going through life and being like, this is everything is kind of organically just kind of it's like a garden that just keeps, you start with a little tiny seed and then it just starts to slowly grow, and you can prune it and kind of guide it, but eventually it just keeps growing and blooming, and then you have like this, not necessarily a finished product, but you have a much closer ideal of like what you want to be and who you are as you grow.
Beautiful analogy. I got a lot out of reading your work, and it makes me want to read more of your work. And I think that's going to be the response to a lot of people who pick up this anthology. They're going to want to find out more about what you've done and read more of his beautiful prose. I'll just show you these again. You're going to get your copies soon. Can't wait for you to hold them.
I'm so excited.
What are you working on now? And I'll share a link to your website and everything I can in the video. But what should we be looking for next?
So I will have a story coming out in Diabolical Plot sometime this year. I'm not entirely sure what month it's scheduled for, but it's a fantasy story about an autistic girl who discovers that her grandmother is a very powerful entity among birds, and then she goes on this adventure to help find a song that was lost to take it to the bird queen, and it's very, very like imaginative, and I had a ton of fun writing it. So
Sounds
that'll
awesome.
be thanks. Yeah, that'll be out in Diabolical Plot sometime this year. And then I'm working on a novelette, which might end up longer because apparently I've forgotten how to write short. But I'm working on a dark fantasy novelette, and then I am aiming to go like deep dive focus on writing a novel.
Oh, awesome. Cool. You're going to do NaNoWriMo again this year?
Yeah, probably, since work has been much more slowed down
Yeah.
with everything going on. But yeah, I do enjoy NaNoWriMo, and it's been a couple of years since I've done it, so I think I'm gonna give it another shot.
Yeah, it's been a while for me. I think I'm going to do it again. So we'll have to buddy up on there so we can
Yeah, for sure.
motivate each other. Thank you so much for contributing these stories to the anthology.
Oh yeah, well thank
And
you.
thanks for taking time out of your day today in your writing schedule to talk with us and for helping educate me. And cannot wait to read more of your work. Just
Well
really
thank you.
impressed.
Yeah,
Really impressed.
this has been great. So
Cool. Thanks. Have a good one.
thank you. You too.